views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Last week in a 6-3 ruling, the United States Supreme Court did something it had never done before. It rolled back civil rights that it had defined almost 50 years ago, namely overturning Roe v. Wade, eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion. Friday's Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe leaves the future of abortion in the hands of each state. 13 states have so-called trigger laws that would ban abortions immediately, and 16 have laws that would protect women's reproductive rights, creating a huge moral divide across our country. Some believe that a human person comes into being at conception and that abortion ends an innocent life. Others feel just as strongly that any regulation of abortion invades a woman's right to control her own body and prevents women from achieving full equality. Tonight, we'll try to unravel this highly controversial and charged Supreme Court decision, specifically on how it affects the women in the Bronx and in the city of New York. So, please join me in welcoming an internationally known leader in the struggle for women's rights, a healthcare pioneer, founder of women's health, political, and reproductive rights organizations, and a prize-winning writer and publisher, Merle Hoffman. Ms. Hoffman, nice to have you with us.
Very good to be here. Very good to be here. But not on this topic.
Well, you know, it's got to be done. And the director of the Sexual and Reproductive Health Bureau of Maternal, Infant, and Reproductive Health Division of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Welcome back to Estelle Raboni. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Raboni.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Ms. Hoffman, let's start with you.
Okay.
So you've been doing this for a very long time. You've worked so hard and fought for reproductive rights over the years. Even though it was anticipated, this was not a surprise. What was your reaction? What did you say when either you saw it on TV or you got the news one way or the other that, in fact, the vote had come down and this is what had happened?
Well, I have to compare it to when my mother died, you see, because she was very ill for a long time, and I was taking care of her, and I was aware that her death was imminent. Compared to, I was aware for decades that Roe could be very, very fragile. But, you know, it's still there. It's still there. So when it happened, in other words, it was such a great loss, as with my mother's death, it was such a great loss, you can never be fully prepared. Because how do you prepare yourself for such a loss personally? And how do you prepare yourself for the Supreme Court of what is supposed to be our democratic republic ripping away the constitutional protection of Roe v. Wade and the right to a legal abortion from more than half of this population, which is why I was doing so much political action starting in January, and which is why we're in the position that we're in now. So basically, I was working when it came across my computer. I took a deep breath, I mourned, and then I said to myself, and I'll say to everybody watching this program, you take the time to mourn, integrate it, then you organize and you fight back.
What is your main concern right now? And I mean, when you look at what the ramifications of this are, what are you most concerned about?
What breaks my heart or stretches it the most are the women, are the lives, the people, the young people, the kids who are going to be, you know, their lives are ruptured, aside from the fact that, you know, overturning Roe and sending it back to the states does not end abortion. It ends legal abortion in 26 states. So in those states, there are going to be women who aren't able to access pills, who aren't able to access money, who aren't able to access coming to New York or other states where they will be able to get a legal abortion. And they're going to do what women have done throughout the centuries. They're going to try to self-abort with very often dangerous household products. Or if they can't do that, they're going to be forced to bear a child against their will, which I consider an absolute form of slavery, and which is why I'm talking about positioning this right to decide when and whether to be a parent under the 13th Amendment, which is Amendment Against Slavery. That's what I'm most concerned about. I'm concerned about the women, the lives, the struggling people I see every day.
Right.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Ms. Raboni, let's bring you into the conversation just so people can understand, because maybe they've heard of different branches of the New York City Department of Health, maybe not even aware that there was the division that you represent, Sexual and Reproductive Health. What do you do and who do you work with? And explain what it is. Before we start to ask you about the ramifications of this, let's inform people of what the city has in place right now to deal with these kinds of issues.
Thank you for your question, Gary. We work really upstream. So not to say that, abortion services are not critically important. Abortion is basic health care, and we support women's access to that really critical health care. But we also work with schools across the city to make sure that young people are receiving comprehensive and medically accurate sex education, so that young people know, how do you get pregnant? When does pregnancy really begin? Which is not at fertilization, it's at implantation. What is sexual anatomy? What's a healthy relationship? And then connecting all of those young people through middle school and high school, and especially our most vulnerable young people who are in special education schools or District 75 schools, to the services of high quality teen friendly clinics, so that they can continue to get access to sexual and reproductive health care, and also be able to ask questions of those medical professionals. So we do work to make sure that young people have all the information and all of the services that they need, so that they don't find themselves in a situation where they might need an abortion. The good news that I would say is that we do live in New York State, and we do have minors' rights for young people. But, we have to be careful. As Ms. Hoffman said, we have to be proactive, because, the impact that the Supreme Court has made could impact our own laws that protect our young people.
I was thinking about this, and maybe it's I don't know, somewhat naive of me to think. I said, does this decision open up a useful dialogue for you to be able to say, because I'm sure especially young people are coming in going, wait a minute, what is this? What is this about? So rather than you or others, of course, I mean you and your colleagues, have to kind of bring up a subject and talk about it, maybe you can kind of say, well, this is what the law is, and now all of a sudden they kind of get informed. And what is that message to girls, young girls specifically, or even young adults, or anybody, really, any women, that you try to deliver so that they don't have unwanted pregnancies or be in a situation where they've got to make what is a very horrible and difficult decision?
And Gary, is that question to me or Ms. Hoffman?
That's for you, Estelle. I really wanted to get your ideas about, does it open up a dialogue that is useful to you and your colleagues to talk to young people and say, well, now wait a minute, let's look at what's going on here.
I mean, it does, Gary, but quite frankly, it opens up a dialogue that starts off from a position of fear. And we don't want young people to be afraid. They are entitled to these rights. They are entitled to these services. So frankly, we'd like to start from a position of here's information that is, good for you to have, that allows you to make healthy and informed choices, as opposed to this right has been repealed. from most of the millions of women across the country. And, this is what you need to know about it. I think it's important for young people to know, but also know what they are entitled to, which I think is a much more positive, frame of reference and a frame to go forward.
One of the things, well, I just wanted to add one of the things that has come out in this dialogue, and we'll let Ms. Raboni and then Ms. Hoffman weigh in on it, is the notion, and I was not aware of it till we did a show on this in February, this notion of quote-unquote fake clinics that have been set up. We had an advocate on the show in February who said there are more fake clinics than actual abortion clinics in New York City, and maybe in the Bronx. I don't remember the characterization of it. That blew my mind. So, and then this has come out in the media that as part of this effort, there have been people counseling, specifically young girls, but women, all women, to not have an abortion, even if it might not be in their best interest. I mean, so Ms. Raboni, your thoughts about it, and then Ms. Hoffman about it. You're aware of this, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, we have information on our website that talks very specifically about crisis pregnancy centers, but I'm glad that you call them fake clinics because that's exactly what they are. They mislead women and girls into thinking that they are an actual clinic, but in actuality, what they are there for is to convince young people and women to not move forward with an abortion. And they're very strategically positioned to actual abortion clinics and health centers that provide abortion care right on 149th Street in the South Bronx, across from Planned Parenthood. There is a crisis pregnancy center, and it's been there for years, and very intentionally to mislead young people and young women of color in particular, and it's a travesty.
That was actually documented, I think, very specifically. I think I saw it in the Times. But Ms. Hoffman, this has been a concerted effort for decades to do this. What's your thought about these clinics? Is there any way to, at this point, I mean, it's confusing, but is there any way to combat it? Is there any way to address it or to deal with it? What are your thoughts?
We've been dealing, when I say the organizations, the independent clinics, have been dealing with this as a tactic of the anti-choice movement for quite a long time. In fact, they have buses sometimes that they try to get in front of choices, but I have everybody parked there so they can't stay. My thinking is that we all live in a tsunami of information, a tsunami of facts. And obviously so many people are on social media, and there's just so much coming in at all of us at one time. I mean, how does anybody really tease out what's real, what's true, or what's false? That's a very difficult thing. And certainly when you're looking for abortion services or services when you're pregnant, that's a time of crisis and high anxiety, and when you're anxious, you get flooded, and it's even more difficult to try and figure out where do I go and who's telling me the truth. So we tried. I know they advertised when there were yellow pages. I think they may have even advertised that far.
That is how you kind of line your soldiers up on the field to get to where we got to. I'll tell you, when you talk about misinformation, I just saw this literally a day ago. I think it was on News 12. I don't like to criticize people in other media, but there was a guy who was anti-abortion, and he said that, look, even nowadays, women are getting abortions just minutes before giving birth. It was a complete lie, and I was like, who, first of all, where is he coming up with this? I mean, if we have issues to talk about, let's talk about them. And let's face it, the numbers, and I did some research, the numbers are showing that Americans are having half as many abortions as 30 years ago. They say, and this, maybe we credit Ms. Raboni in some of her programs, including better contraceptive use, less sex among teenagers, and all of that is leading to fewer unintended pregnancies. Ms. Hoffman, we'll give you first a crack at this. The New York Times, I thought, did a very, very interesting study of the typical patient. Who is it that's actually getting abortions? So I just want, we have it on the screen. We can put it up on the screen. They say, number one, she's already a mother. She's in her late 20s. She has attended some college. She has a low income. She is unmarried, is in her first 6 weeks of pregnancy, is having health concerns, and by and large lives in a blue state because, of course, more likely then to get an abortion. Ms. Hoffman, how do we get to those people and explain to them how they can go about getting the care that they need?
We get to those people by educating as much as possible, and trying to get through that maze of the tsunami. The first thing I was going to say when you said who is getting abortions, and I'm glad it was the first one, mainly mothers, because I've always said, and it's important to understand, that abortion is a mother's act. And what I didn't see there is I've done 2 studies with the Delphi University quite a few years ago, which I called abortionomics. And there is definitely a connection between inflation and how often or how many women choose to have an abortion, because very many women make that decision because they just can't afford another child, because the economics of it are impossible. So I'm looking at a situation now where Roe is overturned, creating these egregious situations. The economy is in trouble. The inflation is going through the roof. We're going to have more and more need for abortions. More women and girls are going to, be in very, very deep trouble, may even die or get botched abortions again. And, we're going to see more here. So it's a Kafkaesque situation. How do we get to them? As much as possible. Your show is one thing, what the Department of Health, who I've worked with for years, is doing. We just try and do as much as possible.
Keep getting, and of course, we'll go back to accurate information. Ms. Raboni, was there anything on that list that surprised you?
No, absolutely not. Nothing of it surprises me. I mean, we know for a fact that, it's usually mothers. We're not surprised that, Catholic women seek abortions. There's this assumption that somehow if you are affiliated with a particular religion, you're less likely to have an abortion. And that's why I keep saying, abortion is basic health care. Even if someone elects to have an abortion, very often, that's a pregnancy that might have been a wanted pregnancy. Maybe there's a genetic abnormality. Maybe there's an ectopic pregnancy. Maybe it's a miscarriage, and the miscarriage is not processing, fully, and so the abortion is necessary. So, it's just basic healthcare. None of that information surprises me.
Switching gears slightly, Ms. Raboni, since you're working with the city, obviously we are likely to get people traveling here from other states for care. I saw one note that in the state of Colorado, because they are on the border of states that will not allow abortions, they're actually going to set up mobile units right at the border so that people don't have to travel all the way into the state. But Ms. Raboni, is the city of New York preparing to deal with what will likely be an influx? And if so, is it opening new clinics? Is it greater staffing, which of course is always an issue in our medical facilities? So I don't know, what can you tell us about what the city is preparing to do?
I mean, the city is certainly, one of the first things that the city is doing is that continuing to, as Ms. Hoffman had mentioned, continuing to educate and to communicate that abortion is safe and legal in New York. And that's important because anti-choice forces will use this opportunity to disseminate as much misinformation as possible. So even people within New York State will begin to think that somehow they don't have access to these services when in fact they do. So there is communication that needs to be done. We are also, making sure that all of our information on our website is current, that people can find accurate information in, the sea of misinformation that will be out there. But it's, I defer to Ms. Hoffman, because while I think many providers have been aware that this is a possibility, it does come as a surprise, and it takes time to set up, a clinic. It's not like,
very
oh,
easy.
we hear it about in February and somehow we can upstand a clinic in just a few months' time. It doesn't work that way, so I think it doesn't work that way. So I think we're all being very strategic in terms of making sure that people know services are here, providers are working together, and we're communicating as hard as we can and as loud as we can that these services exist.
And I think in the state, and there we can ask Ms. Hoffman about it, in the state they're talking about a greater funding, and of course that would help the city of New York. A quarter of U.S. women of reproductive age could have to travel more than 200 miles to obtain a legal abortion. That's what the latest numbers show. Ms. Hoffman, Justice Thomas has suggested that this might even be the beginning. I mean, he talked about contraception, access, same-sex relationships, same-sex marriages. All of these kinds of things are potentially, on their docket for the future. What are your thoughts about that? Are you worried about that? Or are you so focused now on what just happened that you can't even begin to consider the implications of those things?
Now, we were considering this and we put them forward when Rise Up for Abortion Rights started in January, because we want to build as broad a coalition to fight all of this as possible. You see, of course they're going to go for LGBTQ rights, because those rights were determined legally on Roe, on the core of Roe, which was the right to privacy. So Thomas has said he's going to go after that. He's going to go after contraception. So we're living in a time of what I would call an absolutely illegitimate court and an illegitimate decision. So yes, people do have to realize, there's sort of this natural defense, which I saw decades ago after the Hyde Amendment was passed. In 1977, they passed a law that says no Medicaid funding for poor women. And these are the patients I work with every single day. That's what politicized me. The pro-choice movement should have been out in force, 1977, because anything that is done to take a right away from any person, any woman, affects me. And, through the harassment, I was evicted twice. A friend of mine was murdered through Dr. George. I mean, and there was this attitude that they'll never take it away. And I think what surprised everybody is that, they've worked, the anti-choice movement has worked very strategically, which you started to say, Gary.
We saw the results of that. Now, Justice Kavanaugh said that the overruling of Roe was going to be the end of the story. I don't think we need to go any further and say people don't believe him in saying that. I want to ask both of you about this. Maybe, Ms. Raboni, you can address this notion of abortion pills, that it's known as medication abortion. It's authorized by the Food and Drug Administration for use in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. What do you think of this? Is this an answer? But of course, then the suspicion is that some of those states will end up, banning those or criminalizing the possession of those as well. What are your thoughts about them? Do you talk about them with your colleagues? Do you recommend them on occasion? Maybe you can just give us a little background of what it's really like and what we're telling people.
No, absolutely. I mean, medication abortion is one form of abortion, and that certainly is a way to, not have women forced to go to a clinic to actually get a procedure. But that's just one form of an abortion. So, my concern is, and this is already happening, is sort of like modern Comstock laws. So if you know your history, Margaret Sanger wasn't able to send birth control devices through the mail because of the Anthony Comstock laws, which prohibited such things to be sent through the U.S. postal mail. There's already laws going across the country that are preventing the mailing of medication abortion to states that prohibit them. But Gary, I don't want to limit the options that women should have, which is all methods of abortion services, whether it's medication abortion or surgical abortion. Women should be having access to all of those services. Otherwise, to Ms. Hoffman's point, we really are looking at massive inequality.
Yes.
It will massive inequality. I mean, where you grow up, where you are born, will really determine what kind of life you get to have.
And what options you have. I'm only interrupting because we're going to run out of time. There was a page put out, I don't even know who put it out, of all the companies that are going to support people who their employees for abortion-related care. Of course, I guess the implication would be that's where you want to shop, but at least it's a note. I mean, without being totally depressed, there is support out there. Ms. Hoffman, so just your final words. You talked about. Well,
I tell people there is hope because hope is a verb.
That's what I wanted to get to.
You have to act. And I'm seeing so many women now saying, yes, I've had an abortion and I don't want my daughters and my granddaughter not to have the same rights that I have. And I always talked about so many women who were so afraid to own their decision and say, yes, I've had an abortion and I'm not ashamed about it. So that's really, really important. And I say that I've had one also, and it's important to come out of that closet and realize that if you say inequities. If one person is so unequal in this country, then we've lost our vision and we've lost our direction.
Maybe that is a good final word, is that we will ultimately, and this Ms. Raboni talked about this earlier in the program, we need to establish systems to continue to deliver this care. I mean, one way or the other, there are still, 16 states that abortions are available. Then that means a commerce thing of moving people around and having facilities available or information available. Ms. Raboni, you can have your final word. What are your thoughts? What are the final, for women especially, young women, older women who are watching, what's the message to them after seeing all of this happen?
I have to piggyback on what Ms. Hoffman said. I think to continue to have hope, but to also to organize, not to agonize, to organize, to shop at those places that are supporting women, to think carefully about where they go to college, because if they are thinking about going to college in a state that doesn't protect their sexual and reproductive health and rights, they might want to rethink.
Wow, that's I hadn't thought of that. Of course, people go to college in a state. Maybe they come from New York and then they're going to go to Oklahoma for college, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation, and it's going to be even more difficult. Listen, Merle Hoffman from the Choices Women's Medical Center, thank you so much. Estelle Raboni from the City of New York and our wonderful Department of Health. You 24/7, we see you on TV, and you guys are all working really hard. Thank you so much. And we also, of course, always thank our producers, Rebecca Hemick and Stephen Powell. Our director today was Nick. Nice to have Nick with us. And guess what? Next week, we'll see you then. Good night.